If you suspect that we're not just biological robots and that consciousness may be non-physical, you need empirical evidence in this materialistic world. Now, that's why Pim van Lommel's work is so important. As a cardiologist, he occasionally heard amazing accounts of profound inner experiences from patients who had been clinically dead because of cardiac arrest. So van Lommel decided to do a longitudinal and prospective study about the phenomenon, and what he found was compelling evidence that consciousness is not produced by the brain. He also wrote a book about it. It's called Consciousness Beyond Life. I hope you like this clip.
So I was raised in a medical school and university that consciousness is a product of brain function. So it should be impossible that people can have enhanced consciousness with memories, with the possibility of perception out and above the body during cardiac arrest. So, and the first time I ever heard a patient with telling an NE without knowing that these kind of experiences existed was in 1969, one of the first coronary care units in the Netherlands. I was just starting my training as a cardiologist. And in the second coronary care unit in Holland, we had a patient of 43 years old who had a cardiac arrest, and we resuscitated him with defibrillation and external chest compression. And he regained consciousness after 4 minutes, and we were so happy. It was the first time for me as a physician that we succeeded to get someone back. But the patient was extremely disappointed. Now going through a tunnel, seeing a light, seeing wonderful landscapes, etc. I never forgot this. And we don't remember or realize anymore that the modern techniques of resuscitation, CPR, is only possible since 67, 68. So before 67, all patients died with cardiac arrest. So since the modern techniques of resuscitation, we have the possibility to talk to patients who survive a cardiac arrest. I didn't know anything about near-death experience. So until I read a book in 1986 by George Ritchie, Return from Tomorrow, who, as a medical student in 43, died from liver pneumonia, and there were no antibiotics available. And he had a very extensive near-death experience in a period of 9 minutes of death. He was resuscitated because his body was already covered with a sheet, and the nurse was so upset that this medical student had died that he persuaded the doctor to give him an injection of adrenaline right into his heart, which was quite uncommon at that time, and he regained consciousness. He had a very deep and extensive NE. When I've read this book in 86, I just started out of curiosity to ask patients who had survived a cardiac arrest if he had memories from this period of unconsciousness. And to my big surprise, within 2 years, out of 50 patients I asked this question, 12 patients told me about the NE. That was the moment my scientific curiosity started to grow, because it was impossible, according to current medical science, that people could have these kind of experiences. So until that time, 88, there had been just retrospective studies done with a huge selection of patients, and you never know exactly what happens medically after 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. So in that time, the theory was it was just lack of oxygen in the brain, neurotransmitters, hallucinations, bad dreams, trying to be very interesting, etc. So then we started our study in 88 with a prospective study of 344 consecutive patients who survivors of cardiac arrest in 10-day hospitals. And then we did a second study of longitudinal study with late interviews 2 years and 8 years after the cardiac arrest with all patients who survived with an NE, and then a matched control group of patients who survived the cardiac arrest without any memories, to see if the transformation, what I told you before, was a result of cardiac arrest or a result of the NE that was never studied before in the prospective design. Now, what we found in our prospective study, the 344 patients, is that there was no explanation at all why patients should report a near-death experience. So the duration of cardiac arrest, 2 minutes or 8 minutes, didn't matter at all. So the duration of unconsciousness, 5 minutes or 3 weeks in coma, didn't matter at all. Complicated CPR with the artificial respiration didn't matter at all. In the cardiac catheter with electrophysiological studies, we have sometimes to induce cardiac arrest in patients, but we resuscitate them within 20 to 30 seconds. Didn't matter at all. So the severity of anoxia, lack of oxygen in the brain, was not an explanation at all why patients reported NE. And it was the same with the given medication. The same with psychological explanations or fear of death before the arrest. No religion, if they were atheist or Christian, didn't matter at all. Education, gender, didn't matter at all. So to our surprise, we found that there was no medical explanation, and we could exclude lack of oxygen in the brain as an explanation about cause and content of the NE.
And heightened levels of CO2 is the same with that, or
same with that too. Yeah. So when you have cardiac arrest, the oxygen level is lower and the CO2 is higher than normal. That is not an explanation at all. So we could exclude all the medical, physiological, etc. explanations.
Mm-hmm. But often or always when people have had these experiences, their EEG, to the extent that those have been measured, has flatlined. Is that correct?
So what of course, the challenge is to know what happens in the brain and in the body when you have cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
So there have been studies done in induced cardiac arrest, let's say from patients who have an ICD, an internal defibrillator, to measure the threshold testing. And they did it with EEG registration, so the registration of the electrical activity of the cortex of the brain. Now what we see when you measure the blood flow of the carotid artery in cardiac arrest, the blood flow is zero without 1 to 2 seconds. The people lose consciousness within several seconds, 2, 3, 4 seconds. There are no body reflexes left, so the body is totally without any reflexes, which is a function of the cortex. The brainstem reflexes are done. The gag reflex, you can put a finger in someone's throat. Whitened pupils who don't react to light or corneal reflex are gone. And the breathing.
So basically, they're in a coma. Is that what you call it?
In coma, you can have sometimes even brainstem reflexes, but in cardiac arrest, there are no brainstem reflexes left.
Okay.
And then you have the breathing center close to the brainstem, which stops functioning. So people have apnea; they don't breathe anymore. And when you measure the EEG activity in all patients within 10 to 20 seconds, there is a flatline EEG. So all patients in our study must have had a flatline EEG because no patient will ever be resuscitated successfully within 20 seconds. It usually takes 1, 2, 4, 5 minutes, and an out of hospital arrest much more. So the mortality rate in patients in out of hospital arrest is about 90%. So when you don't initiate CPR within 5 to 10 minutes, all patients will die due to irreversible damage to the brain. So it's called clinical death. It's the first stage of the process of dying. And these patients we studied in our Dutch prospective design.
So flatline EEG is for a layman something that indicates that there is something else going on here than brain activity. Of course, when people experience these things. Can we also talk a little bit about the fact that these people have heard and seen things in the room, for instance, where they have been resuscitated, which has been corroborated by personnel in the room afterwards? Because that's, I think, sometimes important for skeptics to hear, in order for them to maybe change their minds about it, because otherwise they can always say, oh, that's just a figment of imagination. But there are some concrete things here. Can you?
It's very important. Your question is very important. That was for us very important as well. So there's a study chapter written by Jane Holden in the book yearbook of near-death experience, and also recently a book, The Soul Does Not Die, with in a total more than 200 cases from critical perception that had been corroborated by doctors, nurses, and family members. And also in our study, we described also one very intriguing out-of-body experience of a patient. We published it in the Lancet article as well. It is also in my book.
Yeah.
Of a 44-year-old man who was brought into coronary care unit, who was found in coma in a meadow, and the people didn't start to do CPR really. So when he was brought into hospital by the ambulance, they were doing external chest compression, and in the ambulance they had tried several times to defibrillate him without any success. So when he was brought into hospital, the coronary care, his body was cold, already blue, no circulation, no breathing. His pupils were wide, not reaction to light. And the first thing the nurse wanted to do is to give him artificial respiration, so to intubate the patient, to put something in his throat to give him more oxygen. They found out that this patient had a dentures in his mouth, so the nurse removed his upper denture and put it somewhere under in the crash cart. And this patient needed 1.5 hours, which is quite long, before he had circulation, blood pressure again. But because he was young, they really did a good try. But he was still in coma. He still needed artificial respiration. So he was transferred to the coronary, to the intensive care unit to continue artificial respiration for 1 week. He was 1 week in coma. Then he was brought back to the coronary care. He was just there, and the nurse came in for medication. He saw the nurse and said, "You know where my dentures are." And he told the nurse that he had taken out his dentures and put it in a sliding underneath of in the crash cart. He could describe the appearance of all the nurses and the doctors who were busy with the CPR. He could describe the resuscitation room from above, where he was brought into coma, where he was transferred to the intensive care room in coma. And he could describe it into detail. So this proved that what he described as a perception out and above his body was corroborated by the nurse, by doctors, etc. And it seemed to be true. So but skeptics always say this is an anecdote. But we have so many stories of this critical perceptions that there's no other explanation for this kind of perception.
There have sometimes been placed symbols close to the ceiling on top of lamps and things in operation room, in order to see if these patients that are in coma can afterwards describe what symbols are, but they seldom look at those symbols.
Well, we had two resuscitation rooms in our study as well, with hidden signs above the operation lamp.
Yeah.
And other studies have done also by Penny Sartori in the UK, and also still Sampani is doing it in the US. And until now, there has no patient have ever seen this hidden sign somewhere close to the ceiling. And there is an explanation for it. When you perceive, also when we are awake, we only perceive when we have intention and attention. When you drive a car and you look at your iPhone, there are so many accidents now because you cannot do two things at the same moment. It's called unintentional blindness. There are also studies done, and I refer to it in my book as well. So when you are out of your body, you see your own resuscitation, you see that it's your own body there, where you're looking fine at close to the ceiling. You don't start to look around if there could be somewhere a hidden sign. That's my explanation.
No, because it's not important for that person, for that person's life.
They're not interested at all to look around, but they're so surprised they see their own resuscitation or their own operation.
Of course, I would be very surprised myself. I would be looking for hidden symbols.
And then the perception is totally different from the eyes. So you have a 360 degrees perception, and you can see details and overview at the same moment as well. And also from a position out and above the body, you can see a perception in another part of the hospital, or you can be, when you think of your home, you will be at your home at the same time and see your family members waiting there. So it's not just in the room where you are resuscitated. We can have sometimes a perception from away from where your resuscitation takes place.
Yeah. Then some skeptics say also that, flatline EEG doesn't rule out brain activity, but you write somewhere in the book, I think, that them saying this misses the point.
Exactly.
So how can you explain what you mean by
that? Or to experience waking experience, it's the consciousness we have now when we talk to each other. You have a lot of activity in many neural centers who have communication with each other and integration of information. So you have a network of neuronal networks who work together. And there's not any sign of this global network activity at all during cardiac arrest. So according to our current neuroscience, it should be impossible to have any consciousness at all.
Mm.
So it's not, and we have had, there have been studies done in animals, and also the deep structures of the brain didn't function at all anymore in cardiac arrest in animals.
Yeah. And I mean, you could also philosophically ponder the fact that, I mean, you and I are talking now, but how can we be, who is it, what is it that tells me that I'm going to use these words when I talk to you exactly now in this moment? I mean, I can see the brain activity resulting from me speaking to you, but what's the hen and what's the egg, so to speak? Well, we'll come back to that.
Perhaps can I add something that blind people, blind from birth, can have theoretical perception out and above the body during near-death experiences. There have been written a book by
Yeah, they have been able to quote unquote see things during these experiences.
And they have never seen anything, and people who are blind from birth don't have any pictures when they dream. They don't know anything about pictures, about how it is to see. And then during NDE, they see themselves, or they see landscapes, etc., they've never seen in their whole life.
There must be enormously transformative.
No, it is totally transformative. Yes, indeed.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a good example. But there are still so many skeptics out there, which is a bit frustrating. I checked your Wikipedia page. Maybe you have looked at it, and it only refers, the references to your book is only from skeptical people. You know, it's only referring the skeptical reviews. It's really unfair. There is a debate going. There's a discussion on the article, which you can access. Maybe you have done that, and they are a little bit more. They are critical to how it's been written, but still, it's really unfair because
it has no use. It has no use to change your Wikipedia page, because when you want to change it, you change it again within one day. The skeptics are very active.
They're active.
So I don't look at it at all, and it is not fair at all.
Don't do it.
They're frightened. They're frightened because they lose their worldview. When it should be right, when it should be really happening like will the people with an NDE tell us, then the whole worldview collapses. So they're frightened, and they're very aggressive as well. They attack the person. They put it ad hominem. It's not a scientific discussion. They attack me as a person as well, or they attack Eben Alexander as a person as well. That's how it is.
Yeah, sometimes I get the impression, maybe you do it too, that the skeptic's main argument is that this can't be, because such a thing can't be. I mean, it's a catch-22 argument in a way. So it can never be like this, and thus the task is to find a physical explanation at any cost, as it were. And we will just have to accept that the phenomena we can't yet explain with physics, they are inexplicable for the time being. So we just have to wait. That's the only way they look at it. Do you see it the same way? Do you have the same experience?
The current science has the Western science has a materialist paradigm, which is that only what we can measure, what we can objectify, what you can duplicate, what you can falsify is reality.
Yeah.
So that's the physical aspects of everything we see and measure. But consciousness and the content of consciousness, what we feel and what we think, we cannot objectify, we cannot measure, we cannot duplicate, we cannot falsify. So it is beyond our current materialist paradigm in science. Everything from consciousness. So consciousness studies of the last 10, 50 years are changing the concept and the definition of science as well. So we need what we call a post-materialist science, or an all-inclusive science, which includes subjective experiences as real as well. What we feel and think is our essence.
It is. It's at the core of all knowledge, actually.
Exactly. And they are And there's still a lot of neuroscientists believe that you have to look in the brain to find it. And until now, they did not find it. They will never find it as well. But the problem is for most neuroscientists, the philosophers as well, psychologists sometimes as well, that they have the research money. And when you say it's not in the brain, but somewhere else, they lose the research money, they lose the position on the university. Okay. So they're frightened. And I know some professors who just tell me personally, I agree with what you tell, but officially they say it's total nonsense until they retire.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks and stories on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. And most importantly, become a patron. Click on the Patreon link in the description box if you're on the cell phone, or in the banner if you're on a computer. I appreciate all the support. It allows me to make more and better content. Thank you.